Welcome to the Jedi Ranger. I'm JohnBurry555, and you know what? I need to talk about Star Wars Visions Volume 3, the 9 short films that make up it. But each short film does not continue the story or anything relating to the other short films. So let's talk about each of the 9 individually, then I'm going to give you guys my overall thoughts. Not too different than how I often do these kind of end of show, end of season reviews, but slightly differently because there's no overarching plot to talk about. But there is some stuff to discuss. So we'll save that for after I talk about my thoughts regarding each individual short film. Welcome to the Jedi Ranger. I'm JohnBurry555, and it's time to take a look at Star Wars Visions Volume 3. So I'm going to be taking a look at each individual episode, of course, and then looking at them all as a whole. But with this video, we're going to be starting with, well, the first episode, which is The Duel, Payback. So this is a sequel to The Duel from Star Wars Visions Volume 1. And by the way, The Duel and the character, the Ronin, is probably one of the most elaborated on of all the Vision shorts, as is also a novel and I believe a limited run comic book that follows this character and fleshes out the world of The Duel a bit more. I have only seen the Star Wars Vision short episodes. I have not read the book or the comics, so I won't be talking about them. I did do a little research about them just so I understood them, but from what I can tell, they don't play a major role in the story of The Duel Payback, so it's not vital that you know what's going on in them, from what I can tell. If I'm missing something obvious, let me know. But basically, in Payback, the Ronin, he's still on his journey hunting down Sith. And by the way, this is actually probably the biggest thing to take away from the novel and the comics, is that the Ronin used to lead the Sith until he realized basically they lost their way, and now he's kind of honestly probably the closest thing in the Star Wars storytelling to an actual Grey Jedi. In all honesty, yes, I don't believe Grey Jedi exists as how a lot of us like to describe them in fandom as, a Jedi who uses the light and dark side. But one, that's in Star Wars canon and Star Wars Legends. Star Wars Visions is its own separate continuity. Everything is non-canon except for when it's canon to itself. And The Duel is one of that part that has an internal canon because it has other stories supporting it. It has its own internal continuity. And in this case, this episode does actually deal with in the Star Wars The Duel universe, like the nature of the Force and all that. And while I don't think you could say that the Ronin is a light sider, he's certainly not a dark sider anymore. And just for context, the episode actually opens up on some abandoned AT-ATs, which has been turned into a gambling den. And the Ronin's there to hunt another Sith. And their duel gets interrupted when a Jedi Crusader known as the Grand Master shows up to get revenge on the Ronin for defeating the Jedi Crusader in a duel back when the Jedi and the Sith were actively fighting each other. Basically, the Grandmaster claims that he's not seeking this for revenge, but as the story goes, it shows that, yeah, he's in this for revenge. That is what he's seeking. And at the very end, after being defeated by the Ronin and the Sith, whose name is ANIMA, I hope I pronounced that correctly, is so defeated by them because they work together. They create a temporary truce and all that. And in his final moments, his vision is starting to fade, and he can no longer see color. Now, mind you, in the Duel for the art style, it's a black and white animation art style. It's not showing too much color except for lightsabers and explosions. The Grandmaster, he has a blue lightsaber. The Ronin, ANIMA, has a red lightsaber. He picks up her lightsaber instead of his own, and that is when the Ronin makes the final blow, defeating him. In his last moments, he basically wasn't a Jedi. He was no longer following the light side. He had fully embraced his desire for revenge and all that. And while the Ronin says there's darkness inside of all of us, and I think by extension lightness inside of all of us, you could definitely say in that moment he had been the Grandmaster has been consumed by the darkness in his seeking of revenge. There's a lot more to talk about in the show, such as the Ewoks, which so cute, but also so vicious, which is just so perfect. And I just love how, no, I love stories that show Ewoks, they're so cute, but also so vicious. I just love seeing that. Also, a Bacta hot spring bath. I just love that idea. Neat way to create some world building as well, establishing that many people do in real life believe hot springs have some sort of rejuvenative, helpful properties. And so it will make sense in the Star Wars universe, even in an alternate reality of Star Wars, that there will be back to hot springs as well. It just makes so perfect sense. And the episode ends with the Ronin and Nissan dueling, but it's a very flirtatious duel as well. So it's hard to say exactly how that's going to end because that's where it ends. But ultimately, this episode, I think, is about basically the nature of the dark side corrupting someone as they're seeking revenge. The Jedi Crusader is telling everyone he's seeking justice and all that, but is he? No, he's seeking revenge. And in some ways, that could also be a dark reflection of the Ronin, who in the world of the duel is established through the books, comics, and the first episode as well, to have been also hunting down his former colleagues as well. And there is a risk that he could fully succumb to his own darkness. So there's that little bit of reflection, of course, not knowing as much about from the novel and all that, I can't say for sure. But that is definitely a theme that could very much be present, a dark reflection of the Ronin if he would to fully let the dark side consume him. But those are just my thoughts. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Star Wars Vision is always fun because it allows people to tell unique Star Wars stories, not beholden to canon, and also to, as an American, I don't know much about Japanese animation. Sure, you know, there's the stereotypical anime, and I'm pretty sure not all anime actually makes it across the pond, and I don't really watch anime. Star Wars Visions is pretty much the closest I get to it. And it's just neat seeing these different animation styles and the different ways that different people relate to Star Wars through a lens other than my American lens, because most Visions has been made by Japanese animation studios and animators. I think there might be one that was made by a Korean. I would need to double check that. I know it's not this one for a fact. But we're going to hold off on talking about other parts of Star Wars Visions until we talk about those episodes in Volume 3. So join me for Star Wars Visions, The Song of Four Wings. Welcome to the Jedi Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and today I'm going to continue my reviews of Star Wars Visions Volume 3 with the second episode short. I guess we could use either term. The story is called The Song of Four Wings. So, of the two so far, this one could actually almost slot into the existing Star Wars canon in terms of the storyline. There's some more fantastical elements. Yes, fantastical elements in the Star Wars story. I am shocked. But what I'm getting at, there are some elements in this story that just wouldn't work in the grounded realism of Star Wars? There's no good way of describing it besides just to get into it. That being is, there's a magical girl anime transformation sequence, and there's also AT-ATs coming out of the snow and ice, like literally from the ground up. Cool scene, great animation, is just so cool, but wouldn't really work in Star Wars. But it also does work at the same time. What I'm saying is, we could put this in canon and have no problem with the actual story, just some of the visuals may not quite line up with the visual continuity of Star Wars as we know it. But that does not take away from this story. This story follows a character known as Princess Crane. I want to say Crane, but it's not. It's spelled very similarly, which is actually kind of fitting because later on in this episode, when she investigates, no, not later on, probably around the midpoint of the episode, when she investigates a village that the Empire had destroyed, she sees a paper crane. And I think that's why they chose that name, but they had to give it more of a Star Wars name, sounding name. So Crane, I think, is how it's actually pronounced in the story. But anyhow, she finds out, and she also finds one survivor of the village. The character's name is Wupas, if I'm pronouncing that correctly again. Even though I heard it, I still gonna make pronunciation mistakes. But anyhow, He's actually the same species as one of Smuggler's partisans, who basically is looks like almost like a more of a Wookiee version of a Wampa, for lack of a better term. But right now, just a cute little baby. Um, but anyhow, regards that, eventually stormtroopers do find them, snowtroopers specifically, and they work together to defeat them and escape. I should also mention during this, Krane is accompanied by her droid R9 TR2, who Krane calls Totu, who is basically apparently an old astromech, who has been with her as long as she can remember, because she used to be the princess of a kingdom that the Empire wipes out, and eventually she joins the rebellion. Very much Princess Leia vibes, including with some of her costume, her hair design. A little bit her costume very much reminiscent of Leia's outfit on Hoth, just a little bit rearranged, plus some scavenged stormtrooper armor for goggles, which kind of reminds me of Rey a little bit going on too. So they definitely took some inspiration from Star Wars heroines for her design. And another thing too, there's some diegetic music that I'm going to guess probably is a remnant of Krane's old home, and I think also is the song from what the episode gets named, not just the paper cranes that we see. But regard to that, part of the reason why she keeps Totu around despite his age is because Totu can play her music. Which honestly, I do get it. You don't see it, but up behind my camera on top of my desk, I have my OCD cassette player up there, so that way if I ever want to play my cassettes, which are way over there, I can do so. And down here, which again you can see, but I have my VCR player, because I ever want to play my VCR, plus I have a DVD player, I got a couple of them actually. Because, you still want to, play some of your old stuff. I do not have a record player though. Side tangent aside, going back to fighting the Empire, so Krane discovers that the Empire came to this planet not because there's a rebel base there, but because they're mining coaxium, which I just love that they're kind of plays homage to stuff as established in the actual Star Wars lore, which is part of the reason why I do think it can very much story-wise slot into the actual canon, even if it's not being part of Star Wars Visions and non-canonical, or at least an alternate timeline. Again, there's occasionally a story in Visions that does, and that's because that is what the creators, the directors that Lucasfilm worked with decided to do for their story. After all, Visions are made by several Japanese companies, and the Song of Four Wings is specifically made by Project Studio Q. And clearly, I think their team decided, well, to tell a Star Wars story that, with the story itself, would work in the established continuity, but do so with more of an anime style. Because when Krane actually takes her goggles off at one point, she has anime eyes. And I mentioned earlier there's a magical anime girl transformation. I am not joking. So there's a scene. They do successfully take down one of the AT-ATs, which Krane calls an AT-AT. Ugh. I do not like calling it them AT-ATs. They're AT-ATs. I guess we could translate into Orbish if we really want to. We should probably do that if we really want to be Star Wars fans. That might be another video. Short. Who knows? Anyhow, they take down one of them with a well-placed thermal detonator, which again, just great. But then, the next AT-AT unleashes a bunch of thermal imploders using the sonic boom from the Slave One sonic detonator, whatever it was called, I forget, and destroys Krane's land speeder bike, which has a unique paint design, by the way, matching the paint scheme on Totu. But anyhow, apparently her and Totu have basically a way to basically transform Totu from a regular astromech into a mini X-Wing Expire mech suit somewhat type thing, flying jetpack for Krane to wear in combat. And its framing is like a magical girl transformation. I can't believe they did it, but it was cool. And yes, it looks like a miniature X-Wing. We do see an actual X-Wing later on. And they take down the other AT-AT. And there's also this scene too, where Wupas uses the Force to connect the one plug that didn't connect during the magical girl transformation. And that allows Krane and Totu to make the successful shot to destroy the Empire's mining rig. Speaking of shots, there's also a scene where Kwame fires off the blaster from her speeder bike, and they frame it to look like it's gonna be all super powerful, and barely leaves a scorch mark on the AT-AT. That I loved, really showing the power of the armor and the subversion of making the blaster bolt seem like it's gonna be super powerful and then not. I just love that from that build up and that subversion, which I think works really well to show how strongly armored the AT-ATs are. Not too long ago, I made my 10th anniversary reviews for Star Wars Rebels for the Lost Commander and Relics of the Old Republic. In Relics of the Old Republic, there's a scene where a AT-AT takes a full-on shot from the main cannon of an AT-TE, which in the Clone Wars we had seen rip through tanks before. And this scene actually makes that blaster ball seem more powerful than the main shot of an AT-TE. But the point of both of those is to show how strongly armored the AT-AT actually is. Rebels did that through relying on you knowing what and how devastating AT-TE main cannon blast can be, while in the Song of Four Wings, it relies on building up a small little laser bolt greater than it actually is, and then subverting it. Both are great ways of doing it, and fit the style of storytelling that each is going for. And then at the end, Kwame is talking with Admiral Basil Kusei. I think I'm pronouncing the name right. I'm just reading it off of Wikipedia. But anyhow, basically, the story's version of Admiral Akbar or Admiral Radis in many ways. More like Akbar from what little we see of him. Kwame has talked with him before, of course, on this. By the very end, talking about, just made a lucky shot. Then we see Wupas using the force to elevate one of the little paper cranes, and that explains it all. And there's also an actual X-Wing in the background of that shot. Again, this is a very enjoyable short. I really love the story. Krane connects with Wupas for several ways. One, showing her eyes, so not a faceless monster like the snowtroopers, not stormtroopers, though they are the same thing. But also, too, she is able to connect because, like Wupas, her entire village, well, for her it was probably her kingdom, but basically her home, both of their homes were destroyed by the Empire, and there's that bonding that can occur. Again, I kind of hope, like a few of the other shorts in this season, Star Wars Visions that are sequels to stories from either the first or second volumes, that in a fourth or fifth or whatever volume we get a sequel to this story, because I think it would be kind of cool to see a couple of years on Krane being a mentor for Wupas in some form. I just love the stories of found family, which is very common in Star Wars. And while we've gotten that, we've gotten the Rebels version, definitely, which has definitely got the exasperated parents dealing with the crazy uncle and the two teens, and then the murderous dog. Then you have Resistance, which is not quite the same, but a different kind of found family, but still has that to a certain extent. And then the Mandalorian, where you got a single dad who adopts his son. We could do something similar like in this. We could. Well, maybe not me, but Project Studio Q, if they ever wanted to, and Lucasfilm was agreeable, they could, because I think it would be interesting to see the story continued, because I just find the characters so impactful in some ways. Like, there's so much more that can be expanded on about them. Like I said, the action part of the story, so cool, so many great moments. But for me, I really like more the character side of this show, and I would like to see that continue on in some form. But those are just my thoughts. I would love to hear your thoughts. And join me when I talk about the third episode of Star Wars Visions Volume 3, that being The Ninth Jedi, Child of Hope. That's right, The Ninth Jedi, another standout from Volume 1, is getting a sequel. Welcome to the Jedi Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and today I'm continuing my reviews of Star Wars Visions Volume 3 with The Ninth Jedi, Child of Hope. Child of Hope is a sequel to The Ninth Jedi from Volume 1 of Star Wars Visions, and it's written and directed by, and I do apologize if I get this correct, I am not a Japanese speaker at all, Naoshi Shiotani. I apologize if I butchered that. The studio is Production IG. But anyhow, enough of me butchering those names, because I'm sure I did. Let's actually talk about the story itself. As I mentioned, this is a sequel to The Ninth Jedi, which introduced the concept that a Jedi's lightsaber would change based off of their connection to the Force. So a Sith would pick up it and it'd be red. A Jedi, it would be blue or green. Someone who's teaching between light and dark, purple. Someone who's not fully connected yet, it would be kind of a dull greenish gray, as the animation depicted. That does not come to play a role in this story, which is understandable because that's not what that story was. What this story is about. The previous story was not just setting up the world, but just introducing that cool idea. And this now is saying, okay, well, let's follow the main character, Kara, and basically give her her call to adventure, for like a better term. She already had that call, but the thing is, she's young. She's has great potential to force, as the dialogue in this episode indicates, but she's young, she's inexperienced, she's mentally not ready yet for that responsibility. The characters note that they have to, they'll be there to guide her. But ultimately, the other characters from the Ninth Jedi reappear here. They're kind of put off to the side. Because what happens is they're pursued by bounty hunters, which, by the way, the bounty hunter ship reminds me of a Hammerhead Corvette. But anyhow, they're pursued by bounty hunters, and Kara accidentally gets launched into space, where she's picked up by a droid who's the last crew member of a pretty big and fancy ship. All the other droids have been destroyed, fending off scavengers, so he's the only one remaining, and he asks Kara's help in order to get to his master, the one living being on the ship. Kara first tries to, and actually the droid, I forget his name, asks Kara that after she accidentally sets off the security systems, and he sees that she has a lightsaber and assumes she's a Jedi. She's only a Jedi in training, if you will. She says herself that she's not a Jedi, but that's her own insecurities. When to clear the path, the manual way doesn't work. She centers herself and reaches out with the Force to remove the blockage, and the droid's master, I really should have looked up the droid's name, sadly, like several years ago, because this is like, apparently this ship is super old and it's been adrift in the asteroid field for a very long time, and very ornate as well. Stained glass, different environments and biomes, very, very fancy, mind you. But anyhow, the droid's master had been already dead for quite some time. And that's really just a setup. Then the bounty hunters arrive on the ship because they track Kara's life sign, and they defeat the goons. But the main opponent, Kara is defeated. She does put up a decent fight, but she's lacking skill, so she's defeated. The droid, he basically uses his intellect and creates a diversion, and he's able to bring Kara to an escape pod, and using some of his own power to get the escape pod launched. And then he goes and self-destructs the ship, which stops the bounty hunters pretty much. And then Kara is rescued by her friends. But ultimately, a big part of this episode is that emotional connection that's formed between Kara and the droid. And it's like, why couldn't the droid come with them? He sacrifices himself so to give Kara a chance to escape, because the thing that he remembered his master telling him was basically the Jedi will come back and someday and bring peace back to the galaxy. And there's some other good moments here and there. I won't spoil a lot of those small character moments, but there's a lot of these small, great character moments that just make you fall in love with this droid, and you really feel Kara's heartbreak when he sacrifices himself for her. You wish you could go and comfort her and all that, but you can't because it's a fictional story. But to me, that is a testament of how well written this is. Yes, I'm watching the English dubs of Star Wars Visions. I don't know Japanese, so I'm not watching them in Japanese even with subtitles. I could do it. Yeah, I guess I could. I know they did it for Volume 1. I actually don't know about Volume 2. I haven't checked that out. But I'm just going with the English dub, English translation, because that is what I'm familiar with. And I presume they're doing a better dub than they did with a lot of early animes when they brought it over to the United States, because I've heard that some of the translations were weird. But that's besides the point. The point being what I really want to convey is that this story, there's a lot of it, but it's one setting up that Kara will someday become a great Jedi. She just needs some mentoring, guidance, and also that's the setup because apparently, on the 29th, I believe it was, apparently Lucasfilm announced that the Ninth Jedi is getting its whole own animated series. So that is quite interesting, and this is one that's definitely, I think, well worth it. Like the Ronin, I know has gotten stuff like books and comics as well, and I think that's maybe a better place for that story. But here, yeah, I think I don't honestly I don't care. I just like seeing more of the stuff in general. But the main thing I want to convey is that's great and all, but and they did a setup for that in here, but ultimately the story is this about this young, experienced Jedi bonding with a droid who then sacrifices himself to save her, and the emotional weight you feel in that separation as the viewer because you grew to care and like their dynamic and fall in love with them as a duo, and now that they're separated, it tugs at your heartstrings. It hurts. That is ultimately the core of the story, and what I really love about it. That how it tugs on your heartstrings. The other stuff is great too, but I like that emotional stuff. But those are my thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts. You can let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I will see you when I talk about the 4th episode of Star Wars Visions Volume 3. Welcome to the Jedi Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and today I'm continuing my reviews for Star Wars Visions Volume 3 with Episode 4, The Bounty Hunters. So The Bounty Hunters is produced by the Japanese animation studio WIT Studios, and it follows the story of a bounty hunter who gets a contract from a shady businessman. And can I just say something about the shady businessman? I think his name is Jin something or whatever. I don't care because he's a shady businessman who is using, spoilers of course, child labor, forced child labor mind you, in order to operate his business. The thing is, like, I was watching him, like, even before that was revealed, like, he's doing some unfair labor practices. The bounty hunter, her name is Seven. She has the same gut instinct. And for me, I'm like, man, I wouldn't be surprised if Elon Musk is doing something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if some of those tech billionaires are doing some unfair labor practice. Don't know about child labor for sure, or that stuff, but unfair labor practices? Yeah, I would definitely believe that. But anyhow, that's sidetracked. That's just, he reminded me so much of lots of the tech billionaires and just billionaires in general that have been dominating and ruining my country. So, yeah. Anyhow, there's a lot more we can discuss there if we really want to get into it, but just the way he was presented reminded me very much of that sleazy billionaire stereotype. But anyhow, she does initially take this bounty, but like the Mandalorian, like Din, and probably like several other characters in all Star Wars, she does the right thing in the end. In fact, yeah, she does apprehend the bounties, which are where the businessmen enable insurgents. At first, I thought they were just going to be the parents of the children who aren't war orphans. No, they're just the older brothers and sisters, which works equally as well. And well, Seven's droid, because of his split personality, he's a medical droid and an assassin droid because of some bad program that Seven got done to him. Yeah, which is not so great, but it actually is a bit of a Chekhov's gun situation near the end of the episode, but I'll get there in a moment. He leaves because his assassin droid programming is just being an assassin droid programming and yada yada yada. I say that, but it's like he throws a temper tantrum. Man, split personality or is it bipolar? I mean, I'm not the best, but both could potentially work. If you know that stuff better than me, let me know what you think of that. But anyhow, Seven brings the bounties back and collects a payment, but then she demands to actually speak with one of the children to, hey, are they actually slaves? And the businessman, well, he's like, sorry, for security reasons, we don't let people talk to the workers. That cemented it. even though it was all just meant to well before with dialogue and a hologram as well, that and the hologram is actually what convinced Seven that the insurgents were actually telling the truth. And then so Seven fights her former client. And thankfully her droid does return, and that's where Chekhov's gun comes in, because it comes to a point, because we had seen that the child slaves were wearing collars. He claimed it's to monitor the health. No, the bombs have exploded if they ever tried to get away, and he armed all of them. And unless Seven killed her droid, he would detonate. So she does. One of the personalities. Granted, now her droid's stuck in assassin droid mode. I think it would have been better to have the medical droid programming, but it's the way the story decided to end, and he's taken in for custody to be brought to the Republic. But also throughout this, there's a subplot going on that Seven had been, as a child, abducted by some kind of mercenary group and trained to be a very elite soldier. And that group was taken down by a Jedi. And she's mad at the Jedi because of the actions of the Jedi made everyone think that she betrayed that mercenary group who's now hunting her. So she has some choice words for that Jedi. But the thing is except for that mercenary group is now hunting her down in revenge for thinking she betrayed them, the thing is the Jedi did help her break free of that group, whether she realized she needed to or not, because effectively she was a slave, whether she was aware of it. She was. And that Jedi gave her freedom and all the realities that come with freedom, including having to deal with consequences of your actions. But that Jedi does need to learn a bit about her own consequences for making people think that Seven betrayed that mercenary group. Actually, probably the mercenary group just saw she's the only survivor, therefore she must have betrayed them. And that's what happened in my reading of the story. But ultimately, it's actually a really good story. It's ultimately a story about, but even ignoring that background stuff, it's a story about a hardened bounty hunter making the right choice because their heart gets broken. It's a tale as old as, at least as old as the Mandalorian, but I'm pretty sure we can find examples earlier on in the Star Wars timeline, both production and in universe. But that's what I got to say. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. And I will see you when I review the 5th episode, Yuko's Treasure. Welcome to the Jedi Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and today I'm continuing my reviews for Star Wars Visions Volume 3. Today I'm reviewing the 5th episode, Yuko's Treasure, produced by Kinema Citrus, or is it Cinema Citrus? Again, we're talking about a Japanese animation studio, and the English transliteration I might be mispronouncing, so I do apologize. But anyhow, this episode is set on Tatooine, but before I get into that, I want to note, Disney Plus, Wikipedia, they all have this as episode 5. StarWars.com has it as episode 6. This one and the last ones apparently are flipped on the episode guide on StarWars.com. Made by the same studio, so that might be part of the problem. Maybe, I don't know, but let's ignore that. It's just a weird quirk that hopefully they fix eventually. I don't know where the mistake is, so that remains to be seen. But while that may have been a mistake, the episode itself was not a mistake. It is a great, heartfelt episode. It follows, basically, I would say, 2 main characters, Yuko and Sola. I hope I'm pronouncing their names correctly. And also Yuko's caretaker droid named Billy, who looks like a big teddy bear. And the reason why Yuko's is being taken care of by Billy is because Yuko's parents are dead. We don't know how they died. They're just stated to be dead. And also, I'm having trouble figuring, because sounds like Sola's parents, his parents are also dead, but I'm pretty sure he addressed the cantina bartender as his father, so I am confused. Like, I feel like I'm getting some conflicting information in that regard. But again, that's how people have been talking about things online, not what I read in the story. But ultimately, the thing is, there is this underlying story of found family, because by the end, Yuko considers Sola as a part of her family with Billy. And by the way, there's some super incompetent pirates looking for a treasure that Yuko's parents had taken from them, I guess. Again, they're incompetent, though the pirate leader's henchwoman, I guess, number two, his lieutenant, I don't know. I know why, but reminds me a little bit of Harley Quinn. I don't know why, just does, but in terms of like her mannerisms, I should say specifically. But regardless, they're defeated by, I guess, I think it's a Grey Dragon. Um, but oh man, they're like super incompetent. They at one point capture Billy in order to force him to take them to the treasure, and well, they eventually reprogram him to try to get Yuko to try to open up the door to the treasure, and they reprogram just putting a Darth Vader hat on him, Darth Billy, or is it Darth Billy? Because apparently in Japanese, B's and V's make extreme, or like basically make the same sound. So at least that's a pun that occur in the English dub. I don't know about in Japanese, but that's essentially how they reprogram him. Once Yuko gets that hat off, Billy's back to normal. But speaking of the treasure, apparently in the vault there was one credit. The real treasure was down below the vault because the pirates, being idiots, did not think to check to see if there was a secret hatch or a secret turbolift in the actual case. Billy takes Yuko and Solo down there, and we find Yuko's childhood home and Yuko's parents' spaceship, which is now Yuko's spaceship. And by the way, this is all on Yuko's birthday, by the way. So he gets this great birthday present, basically. And also gets to see some holograms that show basically moments he had with his parents. And speaking of Solo, his thing is also to, he got involved because he was hired by the pirates to get information, but that's all he saw he was. He didn't realize like the pirates were going to, be pirates and burn and pillage. Bit naive there, but he's now in much better company. Like I said, it's a good, just short, heartfelt story, and that's what I really loved about it. There's nothing too crazy about it. Maybe a little bit near the end, with just having a spaceship ready to go that's been sitting without maintenance for who knows how long. But ultimately, though, I will say that despite that, it's just a good, heartfelt story. A little bit about, found family. It's a little bit, not much. It's not as great as some other Star Wars stories have been. But you know what? That's not what it needs to be. It just needs to be a good, heartfelt story. And you know what? Like Tatooine Rhapsody and some of the other Star Wars Vision shorts that are pretty, low-key, nondescript in terms of when they take place and is there any impact on on traditional Star Wars? Do they change anything minor? This can slot into any point in the canon timeline if we really, really wanted to, but we don't need to, because that's not the point of Visions. Is it nice when it could happen? Sure, but it doesn't need to be. And that's ultimately what's so great about Visions. I think I've said this before in some of my other reviews with Volume 3, but Visions is allowing a bunch of Japanese animation studios, Japanese Star Wars fans, to tell their own Star Wars stories officially recognized by Lucasfilm, but they don't have to be beholden to Star Wars canon, be it canon or Legends, unless the creators decide they want to do that. And this one's clearly, they just want to tell a heartfelt story in the Star Wars universe. Does it play a role in the main story? Who cares? It doesn't matter. And that ultimately what makes it so good, because you can put it in any Star Wars timeline and it works, or be by itself and it just works. And that's, I think, a hallmark of a good story, where the setting only enriches it and is now what makes it good. The story itself is what's good. But that's what I got to say. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. I will be talking about the 6th episode of Star Wars Visions Volume 3, the last one, so I hope to see you then. Welcome to the Jedi Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and today I'm continuing my reviews for Star Wars Visions Volume 3. Today I'll be talking about the 6th episode that they released, or the 6th short film. The title is The Lost Ones, which is produced by the Japanese animation studio Cinema, or the Kinema Citrus. Again, I apologize. It's spelled with a K in English, but I don't know if it's pronounced with a K in English. Language translations are fun. But anyhow, this one is a sequel, actually, to The Village Bride, more or less. Honestly, except for the fact that we're still following the Jedi named F, there's not too many other connections. It's just another journey that she's on. And while I would say that The Village Bride was basically about her accepting her role as a Jedi, this is in her role as a Jedi. She helps some survivors from a planet that had been affected by a carbonite mining disaster that basically carbon froze half the planet, helps them get out just in time before a storm hits because they're doing some research in order to try to reverse the effects. And so that's there. But on board the refugee ship with them, she apparently, sometime in her adventures, her leg got cut off or something, and so she has a new robotic leg. The Empire, I think, can I say, the Imperial Star Destroyer model is like, it's like photorealistic, which contrasts with the animation of the rest of the short film. And I think that's deliberate. Really show the manufactured nature of the Empire. It's not just different because it's um I don't know if I'm describing it right, but the fact that it's the Star Destroyer itself is such a different animation style contributes to the feeling of the Empire's authoritarianism, manufactured otherness, um, um, it being unnatural. Actually, that's probably a good way of putting it. Well, unnatural, manufactured, I guess do mean the same thing, but I think you guys understand what I'm getting at there. But anyhow, the Empire figures out that F is there somehow, but that doesn't matter because the Empire is demanding that F surrenders herself to the Empire or they're going to destroy the refugee ship. So that's what she does. Of course, one of the refugees, I forget if as long as I'm not mixing them up, named Ron, I'm actually not quite sure because Wikipedia actually doesn't specify it yet. And for when I'm not sure, Wikipedia has been very helpful for me understanding which pronouns to use. But until I know for sure, I'm just going to use they. They decide to go with F to basically so that way she can actually get out of the Empire. And they use a concentrated form of carbonite to sabotage the Star Destroyer's reactor and destroy the Star Destroyer, and it works. But F is brought into a chamber, and we discover that her Jedi Master, who she thought was dead, has somehow been brought back and is now working for the Empire, twisted by the dark side. So she confronts her former master, now going by the name Zero rather than by his Jedi Master name. Oh, and can I say something real quick? With Zero's design, I thought he was a she, and then like once that was clarified that he was a he, I'm like, yep. I've heard that some Japanese animation style for oftentimes I believe villains, they make them look very effeminate. That's just something I've heard happens in anime, so I don't know why I was surprised that shows up. It probably hits in on my Western lens differently than it would have in the Japanese lens. Just something to take a note of, take stock of. But regardless, that doesn't really matter for the story at hand because the story is about Effie's confronting, I would say, maybe her own thing being set adrift. The show is called The Lost Ones. And I would say it's lost, and the lost ones are multiple. The refugees are all lost. They lost their home, they lost their communities. F is lost, she lost the Jedi. Yes, she's embraced her role as a Jedi, but she's still lost. It's, kind of aimless in what she's doing. She doesn't want to put roots down anywhere, likely because of the Empire. And F's master is also lost among the darkness. So everyone's lost in some form in this short film, and that really fits its title. Of course, the refugees have their new community that they're forming among each other, and F is accepted by them despite her feeling a bit aimless. But I get the sense that after this, she has more of a sense of purpose. Like she stops the Empire and stops her former master from basically reneging on the war, which I'm pretty sure the Empire would have done. But also, she, just like Ron used some concentrated carbonite to freeze her former master to stop him from causing harm to other people. While she may have been lost in some ways, she's not lost in the sense that she knows what her purpose is, to help protect others. She does say something along the lines of, I don't, I forget exactly what. Basically, that's, you know, I wish I wrote it down because it was a really good quote. But the I would say the sentiment was she doesn't necessarily need to protect them, but rather help them, or rather be a part of their community, which I think is supposed to perhaps show that she's maybe finding some purpose, or at least is no longer as adrift as she potentially was at the start of the short film. There's different ways we can interpret this, of course, but at least that's how I've interpreted it. If you interpret it differently, let me know in the comment section down below. And speaking of the comment section down below, let me know your thoughts on this short in general. There's most things we can discuss, but what I covered here is what I felt need to cover the most. And I do hope to see you. I'll be covering the 7th short film in Star Wars Visions Volume 2, The Smuggler, so I hope to see you then. Welcome to the Jedi Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and today I'm continuing my reviews of Star Wars Visions Volume 3 with the 7th short film, The Smuggler from Studio Trigger. So, what's going on in this episode? Well, a smuggler who is in debt is approached by a mysterious figure to smuggle 2 people off a planet. Doesn't that remind you of something? I mean, I actually finally watched I think the filmmaker focus that's on StarWars.com. And yes, the filmmaker for this short film did actually take inspiration from the dynamics that we see in A New Hope, but there is some twists, like an active bounty hunter pursuit, for example. So our main character is a smuggler named Cheetah. Her ship is actually currently locked down by her mechanic because she's not paid up and he's increased the rates. And she's approached by a mysterious figure, the same species actually as Kiamundi, with the offer to pay off the debt for her ship and an additional 10,000 credits upon delivery once she delivers 2 passengers to a system outside of Imperial control. And because this episode actually opened with basically a monologue setting the stage, basically a voiceover version of the crawl, we know that on this planet that the royal family has been captured with the exception of the prince. Yeah, it's exactly what's going on. Cheetah is hired to smuggle Prince Aru, I hope I pronounced his name correctly, and his caretaker, governess. Honestly, she does kind of give me that governess vibe, and you know what? She's a badass because she's actually a former Jedi, and yeah, and Cheetah does. But unlike Han Solo, she's much more how should I phrase it? Much more willing to get involved. Very much so. While Han Solo just wants to most stay out of the Empire's way and sees the rebellion as a failure. By the end of the episode, Prince Alu and Glino, the Caesarean, the Jedi that's been basically helping him stay away from the Empire, who I mentioned already, basically say, hey Cheetah, would you mind helping us smuggle people off of our home world still? And she's like, yeah, sure, because she's excited. She has basically she's like, what if Han Solo had Luke Skywalker's personality? Seriously, that is literally a good way of looking at it. So maybe a little more energetic and all that, but still very much more that kind of style and dynamic. I also want to mention too that there's a scene which provides some really good characterization from Prince Alu. Where it portrays that he's not a noble who has a royal who has no care of his people. No, there's a scene where the stormtroopers are targeting teens who are around Prince Alu's age just for looking like him. Why does that remind me of something that's currently going on in my own country? Not quite the same as just people with a certain skin complexion, but yeah, it's oddly familiar. I wonder. Come on, we all know I'm talking about Ice here and what they're doing. But let's ignore that. No, we shouldn't ignore that. We need to call it out for what it is. And in this Star Wars Vision show, made well before this stuff really got dangerous, I guess, real, for like a better term, in the United States, it drew on that imagery from 1930s Germany, from Jim Crow era United States, from many other historical examples of discrimination based off of superficial characteristics in order to portray the Empire as evil. If you call my Star Wars Rebels review yesterday, I mentioned how the Empire cutting off food is showing that they're evil and people who do it don't have a good look. And it's through those things that we can draw these parallels, because There are certain practices that authoritarians always make use of in order to instill control, instill fear. And it's just a parallel. Life imitates art, but also art imitates life. It goes both ways. And even if while we're watching something directly, say, hey, there's a sneak connection to something going on, how did the filmmakers know? Well, it's just like in Star Wars Andor, the students of history. There is nothing new under the sun, is a saying for a reason. But going back to what Prince Alu did, what he did is reveal himself. He wasn't going to let that teenage boy and his mother be brutalized by stormtroopers just because the teen is around the same age and height as Prince Arul. I know I'm getting his name wrong. That is showing very good moral upstanding characterization, shows that he actually cares about his people. And the entire royal family was arrested because they stood against the Empire, so that also establishes a lot as well. And then of course there's a scene where they have to confront a bounty hunter. That's where Grenu is revealed to be a Jedi, and she keeps her lightsaber hidden in a prosthetic arm, which is a very cool way of hiding a lightsaber. Sure, we've had different ways where a Jedi just keeps it under the robes, just displays it openly, disguises it in two pieces. There's different ways, but the most clever way we've yet seen a lightsaber disguised by a former Jedi. And can I also say, so we do get a little bit of backstory. She, was an Order 66 survivor, and that she, was taken in by the royal family of Prince Aru, Prince Aru's family, the royal family of the planet that I don't remember his name. Is that in? Do I remember? No. Did I write notes? No. But anyhow, on that, it's revealed that she was taken in by them and dedicated herself to protecting the royal family. Hence why the prince was able to escape capture. But also, too, I gotta say, the idea of a Jedi surviving Order 66 and hiding as basically a royal governess is a quite clever way of hiding. Because governesses, at least in media, are portrayed as, or maybe nanny, but I like the term governess for this better because I feel like, takes care of the kids, maybe a bit on the stricter side, teaches them stuff, and if they're a little more aloof than that, no one would expect them to be a Jedi. They would just, oh, yep, just a standard governess working for the Royals. No problem there. But also, I think Prince Arul might be force sensitive because he did some pretty impressive jumps that we saw no other character do in this entire short film. Even Grenu, she does not do any impressive flips. She does impressive stuff, mind you, quick movements and all that, but flips, jumps, impressive ones? Not really. There's also a scene where the bounty hunter that's chasing them before they actually get off planet launches a missile at a speeder that they were given by a resident to help them escape, showing how much the people care for the Royals and want to see them safe, which does not happen too often in real life. Looking at the French especially, or the English in the 1600s. Yes, yep, the English beheaded their king before the French did. Remember that. But unlike the French, they restored the monarchy and haven't unrestored it and re-restored it and unrestored it and re-restored it. But anyhow, that's a really big sidetrack there. But so the missile hits the speeder, and somehow Prince Alu helps make sure that Cheetah does not basically get injured in the fallout of the speeder after being launched by that missile. Which is interesting to me because that seems to imply that he might be force sensitive. Also, I think he might be attracted to Cheetah as well. I don't know why, but I think there's some chemistry there. In fact, there's also good character dynamics in this entire thing. But there's definitely some seeds that if they ever get to continue the story, would be able to be continued to be explored on in new different ways. Or just know the next adventure they're on, helping smuggle distance off Prince Aru's homeworld to help the rebellion, whose base suspiciously looks like Yavin 4. Yep, this is another show that could easily fit into the existing Star Wars canon, no problem. There's more I could say, more commentary I could make, but you know what? Let's keep the discussion going in the comment section down below. Feel free to leave your thoughts on this episode down there. I would love to hear them, and I hope to see you when I talk about the next Star Wars Visions Volume 3 short film, The Bird of Paradise. Welcome to the Jedi Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and today I'm continuing my reviews of Star Wars Visions Volume 3 with the short film by Polygon Pictures, The Bird of Paradise. So, this is the second to last short film. I'll be watching reviewing Black for my next review, but before that, we need to talk about what is probably the most, I would say, not necessarily abstract, but probably the most philosophical, the most spiritual short film that's been done in all revisions volume 3. The premise of this episode is that a very hot-headed Jedi Padawan named Nakima is blinded in a duel with a Sith, falls down the side of a mountain, and goes through a series of spiritual journeys to resist the dark side. It ends with her basically acknowledging the darkness within her, very similar actually to what we saw Yoda go through during Season 6, the last missions of the Clone Wars, where he also confronts his own internal darkness. And by acknowledging it, and that's a part of him, he confronts it, and that's very similar to what happens with Nakima. She acknowledges the darkness within her, and not embraces it, not in the sense that she's going to embrace the dark side, but embraces it as a part of who she is, so that way she can be a better person. This, like I said, very philosophical, very spiritual, much more maybe abstract, because she experiences her journey to confront the dark side through a series of visions gifted to her by the Force, which are again portrayed more abstractly than the, for lack of a better term, the waking world. It's actually left open-ended. Is she actually alive or dead? Because a big part of her journey is her fear of dying, and among other stuff as well. And the last one, where she acknowledges the darkness within her, is basically framed as a duel between herself and her own darkness in the form of that Sith that took her sight. Again, there's a lot of symbolism in here. It is actually probably, it's fairly easy to understand because it very much relies on some already established Star Wars concepts and draws on some additional concepts from different philosophical traditions, different spiritual traditions, things like Buddhism, traditional Japanese folk beliefs. There's a lot of things built into here, but with the base principles that we already see in Star Wars, it's not too hard to follow, but it's definitely probably one of the most abstract tellings of this all. And we actually might get to look at the Force in an abstract way. It's showing it as the galaxy itself and everything that's a part of it. Again, lots of beautiful imagery in here, but it's definitely not what I would say a light, fun-hearted story. But those are what I got to say. I could talk more about the individual moments, the different things that were drawn upon, but ultimately I want to convey to you that this is really well done, very well written, great animation. They used their animation style to very good effect in conveying visually parts of the story. But for me, I go to Star Wars not necessarily for the Force. I go for it more the subtle political commentary that's in Star Wars. I'm that kind of person, and their fun action adventure. Let's be real. And there's some good fun action adventure here. It's just this is very much the spiritual side of Star Wars, which again I like, but is it the part of Star Wars I'm drawn to? Not necessarily. But it's an important part of Star Wars that we need to understand because it does impact the greater storytelling of Star Wars as a whole. But that's what I got to say about this. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. And I'll see you for my review of Black, the last Star Wars Visions Volume 3 short film. Okay, what was that? I'm JohnBerry555. This is the Jedi Ranger, and we gotta talk about the last short film in Star Wars Visions Volume 3, Black. Black is literally the title of it. It's all in caps. It's from the Japanese animation studio David Productions, and it is a trippy, surreal, psychedelic experience. I thought The Bird of Paradise was a bit surreal at times, maybe a bit abstract, but no, that was just philosophical, very, spiritual. This is trippy, this is surreal, this is abstract. It also has no dialogue, which makes it a little harder, I would say, to follow. Like, you can still follow it very well. It's definitely, I think, the story of maybe 2 stormtroopers. Again, we don't know for sure. One in red, one in green. Are they 2 different ones? Are they the same one? We don't know, but from what I can gather, it's their life flashing before their eyes right as a Death Star is being destroyed. That's the only thing that can make sense. It is, like I said, it's hard for me to put into words because it's so different. Like, I would say in all the Star Wars visions, all 3 volumes, every short film, this is the one that's hardest to talk about because it is so abstract, so surreal, so psychedelic, so trippy. We can keep on applying those different terms, but those are the best ways of describing it. It's actually probably one I'm not going to rewatch too often because it's one where it's, there's no cool moments, no cool character dynamics that really gets me to really want to see more of. It's like, okay, this is neat, and I move on. That's probably the best way of me describing Black. It's neat, it's cool, but I don't find it return worthy for myself. And I think that's partially because I'm not a person who gravitates towards things that are psychedelic and abstract. I generally don't gravitate towards that stuff. Those who do like that stuff, all more power to you. It's just not for me. And that's actually an important thing to remember about any kind of art criticism. I've actually been recently rewatching some reviews of Ratatouille, which I really want to talk about myself, and I think I will. But there's a line in Ratatouille that reflects on criticism and art, and in all honesty, that reflection at the end of Ratatouille does, I would say, somewhat inform how I look at criticism, art criticism, and all that in general. It's like there's the art itself, which is worthy in its own right as art, which is different than the criticism and analysis of it, and something we need to remember. And we also gotta remember that everyone's going to like something different than you like, and that's definitely, I think, the case here. It's not for me. I did find it neat. I found the worthiness of it in the art in of itself, but is it the kind of art I would choose to enjoy regularly? Not really. But that's just me. You guys will obviously have a different opinion because we're not all homogeneous, exactly identical Homo sapiens. No, we're all individuals, so we all have different tastes in that. And I want to hear from you about that. What did you think of Black? Did you have the same experience as me? Or do you have some different insights? Or did you like it? I would love to hear your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. So now that I've talked about my thoughts regarding the 9 short films that make up Star Wars Visions Volume 3, let's talk about them as a whole. So, I think this was a really good batch of them. I enjoyed all of them, some more so than others. As evidently based off of the shirt I'm wearing, I'm recording this after I watched Black. So that's the one most recent in my mind, and that's the one that is like, what just happened? Because of its abstract nature. But you get some that are very easy to follow. The Smuggler, in fact, most of them are pretty easy to follow. The Bird of Paradise is a little more surreal, I would say, in its experience, but it is still that little easier to follow. One, Black is the only one of the 9 that emits dialogue, so that does create a different way of experiencing the narrative. You have to be a lot more paying attention to the musical cues and the visuals to understand the story going on. But overall, like I said, each of them are great in their own right, great in their own merits, but some I do prefer more than others. And that's no doubt. Am I going to rank them? Maybe, but not in this video because I want to talk about Visions as a whole. And Volume 3 as a whole has some really great stuff. I loved seeing sequels to some of the shorts in Volume 1. We had a sequel to The Duel. We also had a sequel to The Ninth Jedi. And also a sequel to The Village Bride. We had 3 different follow-up stories to shorts from the previous volumes. Well, mostly Volume 1. But there's also others in here that, yes, I want to see more of these characters. And honestly, for me, those are my favorite ones. The ones where after I watched it, I was like, yes, give me more. I want to see more of them. So, and besides the ones we've already seen sequels for, the ones that I want to see more of include The Song of Four Rings, the Smuggler, the Bounty Hunters. Those are the ones I want to see more of. There's something in those stories that to me either spoke to me or was like There's something about the character dynamic, something about the setting where I wanted to see more of. And that's how I, at least in my head, say, okay, these are one of my favorite stars, the ones, I've already said this, of course, the ones I want to see more of. So, I'm not going to rank them now, because I'm going to probably do that if and when we get a volume 4. But in short, for me at least, my favorite ones are the ones I want to see more of, and my least favorite ones are the ones I'm like, okay, that's neat seeing. Do I need to see more of? Not really. But that's just how I approach this. I know many of you guys are going to have different approaches, you're going to have different favorites. Some of your guys' favorites may be based off of animation style, some may be based off of music, some may be based on story, and none of those are a wrong way of looking at it, especially with Visions, because Star Wars Visions is a creative playground. And honestly, that's what makes Star Wars Visions so good, is it's not beholden to canon, it's not beholden to a set animation style or a set storytelling style. It can branch out from what we know as Star Wars and is a great way to explore different ways of looking at Star Wars. Sometimes we don't get with the mainline works, with the films, with the regular TV, with the other TV shows, with the books, the comics can actually explore some stuff. But in terms of the films and shows of Star Wars, which are the, for lack of a better term, lowest barrier of entry, the widest appeal, Visions is the one time where they really get to experiment, and why I appreciate and love Visions so much, that experimentation. I may not like everything, but I value everything. I hope that made sense to you, but let's continue the discussion in the comment section down below. Let me know your thoughts about any of the individual episodes of Star Wars Visions, and you can let me know your thoughts on Visions Volume 3 as a whole. I'd love to hear from you, and let's keep that discussion going. Thank you for watching my video. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to give this video a like and share. Also, consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date on all my latest content. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and as always, have a good day, a good night, wherever you are. May the Force be with you always.